Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Alumni Roundtable. We've got three great guests today. Three of my favorite people, former Hurricanes, Russell, Maryland, Steve Walsh, and, of course, defensive coordinator Dave Wannstedt, Hurricanes and Dallas Cowboys. And we're going to talk today about the great Jimmy Johnson, who will go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Was supposed to go in this year. He's going in, but the ceremony will be next summer. At any rate, fellas, great to see all three of you. You all look great right now as we battle through some unusual times here this summer.
Very unusual.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I'm just across in Naples, so I'm kind of hidden over here a little bit. I'll stay here, I think, probably till mid-July, then head up to Chicago. Your stomping ground, up to Russell's stomping grounds.
Yeah, my old stomping ground, south side of Chicago. However, it's too cold up there for an old 51-year-old man nowadays. So I'm just here in North Texas. Sun is shining, and just trying to stay safe, man.
That's right. I'm in West Palm, Russ. I know what you're talking about. No more Minneapolis, St. Paul for me.
All right, guys. Let's talk about JJ. And I think one of the great things that stands out about Jimmy Johnson, especially at the University of Miami, was his ability to bring everybody together. His ability to give everybody a job and make them feel like their role was important. He just had this natural ability to understand chemistry, communicate, and bring people together.
Jimmy Johnson, Jimmy and I were assistant coaches together at the University of Pittsburgh under Jackie Sherrill, and Jimmy convinced me to talk about bringing people together. Now, he convinced myself and Tony Wise that we should leave Pittsburgh with Dan Marino and Hugh Green and Ricky Jackson, and we should go to Oklahoma State that was coming off of probation and only had, I think, about 30 guys on scholarship. So he can bring some guys together now. And it really was just a situation that never changed. I think I worked for Jimmy 18 years, and now we're together out there at Fox, and nothing's really changed with him. I mean, he just has that God-given ability and enjoys people, and it just knows how to get the most out of everybody, player, coaches, trainers, equipment guys, it doesn't matter.
And I'll jump in there, Joe, too. You know, being in his first recruiting class, and, you know, of course, he comes in late in the 84 season, and Howard had already kind of recruited that class, and then Jimmy comes in, I think it was maybe around June when they had the change, and so I was in that next recruiting class, and, you know, I think the point I want to make is, you know, Jimmy early on was an overachiever, and I have two stories to kind of back that up. I mean, of course, you know, you had the team, and Howard was feared, you know, amongst the players, you know, obviously legendary coach, and there was this kind of aura around him. And then Jimmy didn't have that right away. And they just thought, okay, here's this guy from Oklahoma State, and they really didn't give him much credit. And, you know, slowly those, obviously, you know, we turned things around. There was a good base to work with, but, you know, he assembled a great staff. And, you know, we had talent in '85. Obviously, we put a nice season together. You know, Wani comes in the next year, and then we make the run to the Fiesta Bowl, where we lose to Penn State, and then obviously the next year we win it. But, you know, he kind of had that same thing going in the NFL, and you know, Dave, you can respond to it too. But I only take this story from my agent. My agent was Marvin Demoff, who was the kind of the super agent of the '80s and '90s, had represented Marino and Elway, and you know, when they were putting, you know, my contract together, and then the trade, you know, when Jimmy was trading me, Marvin made a comment that Jimmy is smarter than a lot of people are giving him credit for. And he knew how he wanted to build the Dallas Cowboys into a Super Bowl team, and again, had a great staff, and then assembled some great players through that draft. So I think, you know, Jimmy overachieved in a lot of people's estimate, but, you know, Dave had worked with him. He knew what kind of coach he was. But I think in public perception, you know, Jimmy was maybe not going to be expected to put the great success like he had, just based on a couple of the stories and experiences I had.
I could personally tell you, I got into the University of Miami and first met him in the spring of 1986. I signed with the University of Miami sight unseen. I wasn't a high recruit, wasn't anybody's recruit really. I signed sight unseen, and I took a visit down to the University of Miami, and Coach Johnson looked at me, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he was really unimpressed. It was hard for him to hide the fact that here's this fat kid from Chicago that I really don't know much about. But then when I got there and to the University of Miami and training camp, and him and Coach Wannstedt worked the crap out of me. And I remember one day that we were doing 40-yard dash testing. And here I am, big 320-pound, 17-year-old kid. It's my time to come up. And I get out of there, man, and I'm running on my toes. You know, I had a little bit of a sprinting ability, even though it was probably for about 40 yards anyway, and I was tired for the rest of the day. But Jimmy came up to me. He's like, wow, man, wow. You can really run. I was looking at your feet, and man, you got. And he was really kind of enamored with the way that the big man ran, and that kind of pumped me up a little bit, and it showed me that Jimmy he liked me a little bit. So that started me off on a good foot, so to speak.
Jimmy's such a unique person, but one of the things I do specifically remember is he was about business, all about business at Miami and at Dallas. And I remember getting on the airplane to go to the Sugar Bowl. It was Christmas Day. I got on the plane and said, "Merry Christmas, Jim." And he said, "Zagacki, Christmas is for lazy people." He was all about business. What was that like working and playing for him? Because you knew what his parameters were. His focus was on business of football.
Well, I can speak to that easily. I can remember many a speech, whether it be from 1986 all the way to 1993, when I had him as a coach at the Cowboys, and he would always talk about, "Hey, fellas, bottom line. The bottom line is the bottom line that." You know, he'd always was talking about what the bottom line was, and that meant for us, you know, hey, it's all about business, and the only thing that matters is winning. And whatever you have to do on this other 6 nights of the week, the 6 days of the week, all should lead up to that bottom line on Sunday of winning. And yes, he was all about business. And when in those days that we didn't win, you don't want to be around him. So that's another story I can tell you on another. Go ahead, guys. Y'all finish that up.
The thing that stood out to me was really the 87 season, about being the best. And obviously we were pretty darn good in 86 with the level of talent we had, but we didn't win it all. And, you know, I just think back to all the speeches and Thursday night speeches and the pre-games and the Friday night up at Miami Lakes. It was always centered about being the best. And that's what always rings in my memory about the 87 season, about walking off the field, being the best. And that was, you know, he was obviously a master at psychology. I think it was his college major, and he was great at pushing buttons and as we've said already, getting the most out of his players. And, you know, he did an unbelievable job, you know, with what he had at Miami, and then obviously taking that forward to a Hall of Fame NFL career in Dallas and then Miami.
I want to pick up on the 87 season for a minute. You win the championship. The 87 season was a really, really long year. I think some of it was because of the Penn State loss the season before, but the season started on Labor Day, played South Carolina in December, beat Oklahoma for the championship. I remember being in that locker room and the love and the joy of the players toward Jimmy. You saw it on the field when you carried him off the field, but in the locker room that night when you won the championship. And he talked about when you're hot and tired, you press on. But the love he got from the players, how did he make that connection, Steve, with the players where there is so much loyalty from the players?
Well, I think, you know, one of the things you have to realize, it was now, I think, his third recruiting class. So now he had flipped that roster. That was his roster. There, you know, although, you know, there were still Daniel Stubbs and a few great players that Howard Schellenberger had recruited, Michael Irvin. But, you know, that roster, the majority of those guys in that locker room were his guys, you know, and there's that goes a long way when you're a, you know, 18-year-old high school kid and somebody gives you this opportunity to play major college football, you're indebted to that man. And then when he's starting to fulfill, all the things that he told you in recruiting and you're winning football games, there's just a bond that's, unlike anything else. So yeah, there was a great relationship of respect and love, admiration, if whatever you want to call it, between, coach and player. And, I think the thing that he now, it culminated in being the best and being a champion and walking off that field, holding that single finger up in the air, this is the right one. that meant a lot to him, and it meant a lot to everybody in that locker room.
Steve, if I could interject, Joe, it was really all about buy-in, man. Buy-in. I remember the slogans that we had during those years, where it was press on.
Press on.
We had those T-shirts that had press on, or when the one year was all it takes is all you've got. I remember those slogans, and everybody, he made sure that he pressed the right buttons, whether it was from the most compliant of us to the surliest of us, to somebody that was a superstar, or for me that year, who only got 3 plays in that Orange Bowl game. I made 1 tackle though. But that didn't. All those of us that didn't get much play time, we all bought in to what he was selling. He was a great salesman, and he knew that if we worked hard in practice, that all of those things that he implanted in our minds, as far as pressing on and bottom line and being number one, we looked at the end and said, you know what, he was right, and it worked. Let's go ahead and let's do it again next year.
Yeah, I would just say Russell and Steve are both talking about buying in. At that point in my career, I was the contact when NFL people came into Miami. So when scouts came in and general managers were calling, I was kind of the guy that would give them the update on our players and, kind of set them up with film to watch and so forth in the Heck Center. And the one comment, that I heard from everybody was that our players were the hardest working players in practice of anybody in the entire country. And these guys were hitting schools from Penn State to USC. And I used to say, thinking that they were patting me on the back. And then when you step away from it and you look at some other places and talk to other programs, there was no doubt that, that the buy-in that the players had, Russell and Steve are talking about, that Jimmy was demanding, it was incredible. I don't think he could do that nowadays. I really don't.
Dave, to pick up on that, there was a point where you guys at Miami had won 32, 33, 34 in a row, whatever it was. Some would say, oh, Jimmy, is that good luck? He said, no. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. We are the most prepared team when we take the field on Saturdays. The other team, sometimes they'll lose the game. Can you talk about, maybe all three of you guys talk about how prepared you were each and every time you went out?
Sure, I'll jump in first here. I think Jimmy, was a defensive-minded guy, and he knew, as a coach, I respect a lot of the things that he did even more, because I think he felt like Gary Stevens offensively was going to have the team ready, and he just needed to know how that game plan was going to fit into what they wanted to do on the defensive side of the ball. And then he was able to tie special teams, which we were outstanding, especially in '87 on that side of the ball as well. But I think, what he was able to do is make sure that all the units were working together, and we were going to be mentally and physically prepared. And that was his job. And one of the things I still remember him doing is, pre-practice, if our minds seemed to be drifting, maybe it was in pre-practice or stretch, and he didn't think we were right mentally, he'd bring us up and just try to get us back on point. And I think that was one of the things that he did throughout the week leading up to those big ball games, where he knew that we had to play our best to win. And I think, that's what I just remember about, just kind of his techniques.
Was there a difference between all of you guys either worked or played in Miami with Coach Johnson and with the Dallas Cowboys? Was there a difference, or what was the difference between Coach Johnson, Hurricane head coach, Coach Johnson, Dallas Cowboys head coach?
Well, I think that Coach Johnson, the difference was that he had the power of the slice in the NFL. I mean, you could get cut at any given time. And as I witnessed with a lot of players that you thought, wow, that was there one day, and then they were gone the next. That wasn't so easy in the college ranks.
Yeah, I think, just, in the early days there in Dallas, obviously we were struggling talent-wise, and he was kind of, Wani, you'll have to come up with the story with the whole Herschel Walker trade. But in the meantime, they just were bringing busloads of guys in on Tuesday, the off day for the workouts, is what I remember. And just really trying to figure out, is this as good as we're going to get, just with these guys on the street and the guys in the league. And, obviously, he figured it out very quickly. But I think, from A to Z, day one to the game, he was the same. He was, we were working hard. I mean, there's obviously, Dave will have plenty of stories, but, if we weren't tackling well, we did, middle drill, which was unheard of even at that time in the NFL. You never tackled to the ground. And if we weren't tackling good, that's what we were doing. If we weren't run blocking good, we were going to do that. We were going to practice the things that got us better. And, I was only there for about a year and a half, and then obviously things, went upwards very quickly. But to me, he was the same. As Russell said, yeah, you have the power to say, goodbye to anybody. And that's a great, I guess, weapon to have in your back pocket and power to have in your back pocket. But to me, it was all about working hard and striving to bring your best. And he was still, playing the psychological games, trying to get the most out of players, because it doesn't matter what level. If you don't get the most out of your players, you're not going to win at a high level.
Coach Johnson, to me, one of the things about him, very emotional, right? Very fiery, emotional. This past year, when he went and it was announced he was going into the Hall of Fame, they surprised him on the set of Fox. Maybe, Dave, you were there. But they surprised him by telling him he was going into the Hall of Fame, and he broke down. He could barely speak. And I don't think we've often seen that side of Coach Johnson. Maybe you guys did in the locker room. What did you think when you saw his response to going into being told he was going into the Hall of Fame?
I was not there, but I talked to him about 2 hours after that, and he honestly did not think it was gonna happen, because the week before that, or it might have been the same day, when they told Bill Cowher that he was going in, they did it on the pregame show. And NFL halftimes are 12 minutes long. And so when it didn't happen on the pregame show, he honestly didn't think that it was going to happen. So the emotions that you saw, I think, I know that they were real. And his first response, his first thing that came to mind was, hey, you know what? I've been surrounded by great people, players, I don't know who else he's got, coach. But I was surrounded by great people. And that's Jimmy. I mean, I had a job offer to be a coordinator at another place for almost not double my salary, but a big raise when we were at the Cowboys. And I remember going in and we were sitting there talking about it. And he said, Dave, the situation you got here at Dallas. You know me. You know how we react to things and how we do things. And he says, you always got to remember that everybody's quality of life has a different price on it. And it might be $10, it might be $10 million, but what's quality of life worth to you? And I left and thought about it, went home and talked to my wife and everything. And I said, you know what? Being with Jimmy and the players we had and everything, that was pretty good quality of life.
I think, the emotion that you saw was genuine. It was that, you think when all of a sudden you're giving the highest acknowledgement and award for your career, you think of all the great people that you coached or you coached with, that you, and really for me and for Russ, I guess I could speak for, is the impact you had on those players. I mean, he impacted my life hugely. You know, from where I sit in a nice home in West Palm Beach, you know, those things are because of Jimmy Johnson.
And Joe, if I can add, I didn't see it live, but as soon as it happened, I got a couple of texts from a couple of friends, and I went on the internet and saw it. And man, I have to admit, I shed some tears too, especially when he said that I was surrounded by great people and great players. I had to shed some tears too, because I felt like, man, I was a part of that. You know, I felt like I was going into the Hall of Fame too. And yeah, that's just Jimmy, man. You could tell he was fiery. He was emotional in practice. He was emotional in the locker room. He was emotional out there on that field. So, you know, why not after all these years show a little bit of emotion and appreciation? I was right there with him.
Dave, how about from working with him as an assistant coach? Because he always called his assistants my crew. And he wanted continuity with his assistants, which he had, I think, in Miami and in Dallas. You guys would jog all the time. He did a lot to make sure that his coaching staff was connected, correct?
Well, we actually had the name. Somebody named us. It was in one of the newspapers, the Miami Mafia, when we were at the U. And I think, you know, being a head coach, the thing that what happens, there's a lot of guys have a lot of different agendas, right? And everybody can kind of be having their own little goals or their own little ambitions, and it can take away from what the big plan is. And I can speak for myself and Tony Wise. I mean, I can name 5, 6 guys, Butch Davis. I mean, we were, when the plan was laid out, when we walked out that door, we were together, and there was no cracks in the armor ever. And it really carried over to Dallas with the same staff. And I think through tough times that carries you, you know. And I think that Jimmy knew that, and he appreciated that, and we appreciated him. And it was just everybody kind of knew their niche, you know, and everybody kind of knew their role and their responsibility and what they were accountable for. And it really was, you know, you got to give him the credit for assembling and putting everybody together.
We'll wrap it up with this. I know this. Whenever his Hall of Fame speech occurs, it's going to be one of the greatest Hall of Fame speeches of all time. That's for sure. I know he's going to acknowledge the University of Miami as one of the great spots of great times of his life. But when it's all said and done, what do you think they're going to say about his legacy? What will his legacy be in football?
I think that people really believe, because I think it's a fact, and I've said it, I'm on record saying it, if he would have stayed at Miami, I don't know how many national championships we would have won. And if he would have stayed at Dallas, they would have won 2 or 3 more or 4 Super Bowls more. So I think that the legacy would be obviously championships, you know, and Jimmy was always his own man. I mean, not many guys would have walked away from the talent and the team we had at Miami. Not many guys would have walked away from a Super Bowl team at Dallas. But Jimmy's always been his own man. He's always known what he wanted. And I'm just so happy that he didn't get shortchanged because of not having a longevity type career, you know what I mean, in any one place. That they did give recognition and credit for the world championships and the national championships, which were so, you know, it so deserving.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, you know, you said it, the talent evaluation, and then obviously to get the most. He would always tease me that he got more out of me with less talent or something like that. It was a backhanded compliment, but I was okay with it. But he you know, Russ, I think about you, and you mentioned about coming in those sprints, those 110s that we try to do in late July, and you weren't doing them. That was a struggle for you early on, but he saw something in you, and he knew that you could get there. And then a few years later, of course, our great fallen teammate Cortez Kennedy comes in, and he was almost a replica of you, and he wasn't going to get there, but you made an impact on him. And I think that was Jimmy saw something in guys, and he knew that they could fit into a piece of the puzzle, and with a little bit of, motivation, a little bit of, massaging, I guess. And he was going to create a talented championship team. And that's what he did at Miami and Dallas.
And Joe, I like to say, just, piggyback on what Steve said. I mean, yes, he, like I said, he took the time to know what was in each and every one of his players. He took the time to find a niche where somebody could be successful, whether they only played 16 plays out of a game, whether they came in on third down onlys, or whether they came in on just special teams. He will find and motivate that person to play his best for those 16 plays. So you could say that he was a great manager of men. That's what his legacy is going to be. He was a great manager of men. And I know for a fact that any of us on those teams, whether it be with the Hurricanes, or be it the Cowboys, you didn't always agree with them, but you knew that he was going to put you in the right place at the right time to be successful and win.
You have a spot in the Hall of Fame because you're going to go in with him. And so that's something to be celebrated as well. And thank you so much for joining us here on our Alumni Roundtable. Great to see all three of you guys.
All right, Joe. See you, Russ. See you, Steve. Be
Hey,
safe.
Coach. All right, Steve.
Hey, Russ. See you, bro.